Hello, I am Sean Sands, and we're taking a look here at the new Mirror's Edge Catalyst, which just came out today, actually. So, Mirror's Edge Catalyst obviously picks up a couple of years after the previous Mirror's Edge game. You play as the same character, Faith, but now it's this sort of big open world game that is a lot more familiar in some ways to games like Assassin's Creed or Far Cry or these other kind of open world games where you're in an environment where not only is there the story you're pursuing, but you come across all kinds of things like this, which is just basically a delivery message, a delivery mission, kind of randomly out of nowhere. But the core of the game is still really all around what has always set Mirror's Edge apart, which is that it's much more of a traversal game than it is a combat game. In fact, I have about 12 minutes of footage I'm sharing here, but that's from probably an hour and a half of gameplay in total, in which time I never fought one person, though I have done some combat in this game. It's almost secondary, and it almost feels a little out of place. Like it just you encounter it, and you're like, well, why am I doing this? Why is this the thing it's having me do now? So most of the missions, most of the things you're doing are a lot more like this, where you are running from one place to the next in a fixed amount of time. You notice it was really close. Like it was down to the zero moment. Like there was not a lot of time left that I had at the end of that race, or whatever you want, race, mission, whatever you want to call it. And you like that's a pretty common thread that I'm finding in this game, is that when it's, and we'll come back to that in a few minutes. When you're on the clock, when you're being timed, it's not giving you really much leeway, and in fact, it seems to be encouraging you to sort of explore and ignore the little red paths, which I'm not totally good with, and we'll actually see that here. So this is another kind of mission where it's, instead of you're got a countdown timer, you're going to get a number of stars based on how quickly you get from point A to point B. Missing doors does not help. That's just a pro tip right there from me to you. But you can see there's a very clear line of where to go. And while I did make some mistakes, one star, 53 seconds or whatever that was, kind of brutal. Now we'll see it again. This is after several months later, and you'll see here that actually I deviate pretty regularly from the path it's given me, which is very much what this game seems to want you to do, which I both like. Particularly in this setting, notice that if I get off track or I feel like my time's not good anymore, I can just hold down the button and restart. And though there is some loading, it's not the quickest restart. It's pretty good to have that. It does give you some incentive to try and explore around. But I'm sort of torn, because there's probably a good 10 minutes I spent just trying different things, trying to fine tune that timing, which, I guess if you're going to have races and time trials and stuff like that, at least make it interesting, make it worth doing, make it so you don't get 3 stars every time. So overall, and I could stop at any point, which, and go do something else. There is a leveling system, as you see here. So each of these things you do gives you experience, and you can upgrade things like combat or gear or movement. You start out with a lot of the movement stuff already in place. This is still relatively early in the game, and as you can see, like most of the movement stuff has been collected right away. But they do have these other moves, like this sort of reverse move, which is pretty cool, which is what I end up taking. I haven't used it a lot since getting it, but it's kind of a neat move. This is sort of a story mission. No spoilers here, don't worry, and there's nothing coming up to worry about. But I wanted to show the difference, because these story missions don't seem to be timed as often. So this is when I think actually Mirror's Edge is at its best, when it's just encouraging you to go through the environment, traverse around, maybe get distracted here and there, maybe try and explore different paths, things like that, but not feel like you're on the clock as much, which is interesting because the game does still have a pretty consistent sense of speed. It's got a lot of momentum to it. Though I do find it interesting the things where it sometimes feels like I get stuck or slow down. I can do a great jump like that. That feels real good. And then I'll get to a slide and it just feels like it crawls down to nothing. But this is, like I say, when I feel like the game's at its best, where it's giving me this open world to explore and kind of play in, and it's doing what Mirror's Edge does, which is really that whole parkour sense of verticality and speed and environment. It's a big world. There's a lot in there to do, but it also feels a little desolate. I don't know, if you notice, but, being up on the roofs, there's not a lot of people up there, which, has some logical sense to it, but it also makes it kind of weird when there are suddenly people there or you suddenly show up. Here I'm going to go tag a billboard or hack a billboard, and there's all these things like steal little chips or discover these data nodes or hack a billboard. As you can see, Sean has already been to this billboard and apparently, inflicted it into my game, so that's unacceptable. That's my billboard now. That's not his billboard. That's my billboard. But there isn't, it doesn't feel like a huge variety. And to some degree, it feels like it starts to kind of have a sameness to it. Like, here's a good example. So I want to kind of explore and find out how to get to that person over there. Why is a person just standing on a roof? So that sense of, okay, kind of disconnect, but also without that, like I say, there's a lot of sort of isolation up here too. It doesn't feel as much like a truly living world. I do love the big jumps you can sometimes make, and I do love, like I say, again, this is the part where it's at its best, where the game is letting you just wander around and explore and see something from a distance and just try and figure out how to get over there. It's not stressing you out. You don't feel like you have to follow the random red line. I have trouble figuring out from what distance she falls and gets hurt. It seems like I'll fall from a decent height and be fine, and then a very small height and she gets kind of hurt and messed up. But yeah, like this, like I figured it out. That was a really great moment. And it goes into this. So here's another time mission, and this one was tricky. So we'll just kind of go through it from here at first. It's not at first. It's just not clear which way to go. The little line, Elysium Labs. Good job. It doesn't make it clear right away, but then you do sort of pick up the red line. You can pick up the path, and you go from there. And you notice I'm following that path pretty strongly. I'm far from doing it perfect. I'm sure there's ways to speed it up. But the red line really, it's so prominent and it's so sort of direct that you feel like, if you did a good job, if you, kind of managed it real well, the red line should basically get you there in the time that you need. Now, don't run into walls. I realize that. There's a lot of improvement to do. But as you'll see, that's not really the case here, right? Time is down to 14 seconds, and trust me, I've still got a relatively long way to go. I come slide under here, and I still have this whole sort of several rooftops to traverse, and the inevitable sort of happens, right? I fail the mission pretty far out. And that, as you will see, becomes a trend. So I spend the next few minutes thinking maybe I'll try a different direction, maybe I'll go a different way, maybe instead of turning, I'll go up off this building and I'll jump across to over there. And it's about that time I realize I can't. And I died, and I failed again, and I failed, as you'll see again. And this is a pattern. Like, I'm only sharing a few of these with you. Let me assure you, this sort of getting right to where I'm supposed to be, but still about 4 or 5 seconds away, or just falling to my death, was pretty consistently a thing, right? Like, I'm here, I'm right there again, and oh my god, if I hear her say, I just got a message again. So I've spared you a good 45 minutes of just me just bashing my head against this one. Eventually, this run.
Labs finds out that I stole this prototype, my career will be over. But it's worth it. The outcasts are dying in the Grey Lands, and this regenerative formula will help. Diseases of all kinds are ravaging those poor
So
souls.
breaking away from the red line, not dramatically, not like going really off to a new area, but just to sort of not following it faithfully so much as kind of living near it, starts to make a difference, starts to shave off the seconds. So there are parts where, yeah, you have to go up here. Now, again, there might be these other things, but yeah, don't go through there. Actually come over to this side, and then meet back up with it in a straight line. So why didn't they just put that there in the first place? It feels a little artificial, like they're trying to give you a general sense, but provide this path. Right, here's another one. Don't go down there. It says go down there and go up the pipe. I don't see how that's possible. And 0, right? Like 45 minutes and I get to 0. My frustration level at this point was what I would call very, very high. And that's sort of the negative experiences that I've begun to have. So there was really only one thing to do. And that's our look at Mirror's Edge Catalyst. Great one moment, frustrating the next. Anyway, as always, I'm Sean Sands. Thank you for joining me. We'll see you soon.